What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video. Today we're talking all about the Canon 7D Mark II. I'm going to share with you some tips that I have for you to try to get the best from your 7D II. Going to share with you some settings that I use, some things that I do with the camera to try to get the best from it. I previously made a video saying that I think this is still a great camera. I said it was a great camera in 2020, and you know what? It's still a great camera in 2021. But hopefully with a few of these tips, you'll be able to get the best from this camera. Now, I'm going to go right off from the beginning and say, these are things that I do. They're not necessarily scientifically the best possible options, but I find them to be really good. I think they're the things that help me get the best from the camera, so hopefully you will find them interesting too. If you do anything different or you have a different opinion, you know what, that is totally cool. Whack it in the comments, let me know what you think. Let's give advice to some other viewers of the video so that they can get the best from their 7D Mark IIs. So look, no messing around, let's get straight into the first tip. Now, the first thing that I'm going to say is to not be afraid of the ISO levels of this camera. The reason I'm going with that first is because whenever you see people talk about the 7D Mark II, you'll get lots of people like myself will say good things about it, and the thing that everyone comes back to is, oh, but the ISO, the low light performance is rubbish. And you know what? That's just not true, right? It is not rubbish. It's not the best. Does it compete, with an R6 or your 1DX shooting at 12-800? No, it doesn't. But I use this camera routinely up to ISO 6400. I shoot entire basketball games with it at 6400 ISO, and I get loads of great images. I made a video just recently about how to edit images, and the one I used was shot with this camera at ISO 6400. If you want to go check that video, I'll link it at the end so that you can. But you see people talking about this camera saying things like, oh, but you can't use it above ISO 400, and oh, if you try to go anywhere near 2000 ISO, your images are too grainy. And that's just rubbish. That's normally where people don't know how to use the camera. If you can expose your image properly, you'll be absolutely fine using it at some of those higher ISO numbers. Does it compete with something like a 1DX Mark III or a 5D Mark IV in ISO performance? No, but you will get it for a hell of a lot cheaper than any of those cameras. So you know what, there's got to be some kind of performance difference. And for the difference in price, the ISO performance is not that bad. So moving straight into tip number 2. Now I know a lot of viewers of my channel will be looking at shooting sports and action. In fact, a lot of 7D Mark II users use it for sports, action, wildlife. Just to quickly say, you can use it for all kinds of stuff. I use this for landscapes, portraits, events, all sorts. But a lot of people I know use the 7D Mark II for sports, action, wildlife, moving subjects. And one of the things that I love with this camera when I'm shooting that type of action is to use back button focus. Now for any type of action, you generally want to be using the AI servo mode when it comes to the autofocus. Probably that's a separate video to talk about why, but you definitely want to be using that. But when you combine that with back button focus, I find that it just makes such a difference. For me, it makes the camera so much more usable, and I love it combining with the back button with the AI servo mode to shoot sports and action. So that for me would be tip number 2. Tip number 3, I would say pull yourself together, get a grip. And by that I mean, get a grip. Get a battery grip for your camera. I've got mine right here. Let's just dig it out. Here it is. So those of you guys who aren't familiar, a battery grip is a handle that attaches to the bottom of your camera, and it can hold an extra battery. So you can fit 2 batteries in here, and this piece slots into the existing battery hole on the bottom of your camera. Let's just connect it so you can see what I mean. So that comes out of there, that goes in there, and that tightens up there. And there we go. That is the 7D Mark II with the battery grip attached. So why would I give this as a tip to get the best from your camera? Well, I link this back again to the fact that I know a lot of my viewers are into shooting sports, action, maybe wildlife. And I find that when I'm shooting those types of subjects, having the battery grip is so much easier. Especially something like basketball, so much of that is shot upright in portrait mode. And I find rather than trying to reach over the top of the camera and shooting like this, to have the battery grip just makes that whole thing so much easier. You've got your separate shutter button on the side, your separate focus button, and it gives you so much more maneuverability, and I find that so much easier. If you're combining this with a longer lens, maybe on a monopod, I also find that it balances the camera so much more with the longer lens on a monopod, having the battery grip on the back. And you know what? Let's not pretend. It just looks cooler with the battery grip on there, right? Look at it. It's chunky. It looks like you got like a 1DX beast out there. So stick a battery grip on there. Why not? Okay, moving on to tip number 4. And that is to try to learn to shoot in manual with your 7D Mark II. If you're nervous about shooting in manual, you know what? It's not that hard to learn. And in fact, I made a video called How to Learn Shooting in Manual in 5 minutes. Go check that out. It's on my channel. Learning to shoot in manual is not that difficult. And if you can do that with your 7D Mark II, you will find that you become so much more adapt to the camera. You can use it in all different situations, different lighting situations, things like getting that exposure just right, combined with what I said earlier about the ISO levels. Learning to shoot in manual is such a key skill, and if you can do that, it will help you get the best of any camera, but definitely with your 7D Mark II. Really, really worth trying to get the hang of shooting in manual. Okay, moving into tip number 5, and that is to make sure that you customize your camera as much as you want to. A lot of people don't realize just how much you can do with the 7D Mark II to customize your controls. I've already talked about the fact that I use back button focus, and I do that with the AFL button up here. I focus with that button with my thumb, and that's something you can do in the menu. You go into the menu and you set it up so that that button does your focus, and the shutter release no longer does your focus, it just fires the shutter. There's other things you can do as well. So I've got this rate button on the back, got that set up so that you can use it to lock a photo. A little bit like the 1DX has a lock button. I've set up the rate button to do the same thing. That means I can go through my photos and I can hit that rate button on the ones that I want to be locked so that when I import them into my laptop, it only imports those rated photos. There's other things you can do as well. There's this little like quick flick switch on the back of the 7D2. You can set that up to do a number of things. You can set up some of the other buttons on the side to do a few different bits. Your star button, there's a whole host of things you can do. Look into the settings, go to the section about customizing the buttons, have a play around, get it set up just how you like it. If you do that, you really will find you can get the best from your 7D too. Moving into tip number 6, and that is going to be one of my few criticisms of this camera, and that is going to be to say, don't use the pop-up flash. Now, some of you guys will know that the 7D Mark II has the pop-up flash on the top. My tip is quite simply going to be, don't use it. Just don't use the pop-up flash. If you do, it is going to turn your photos into those horrible, like overexposed things that you get when you turn the flash on your mobile phone or on your old point and shoot camera. If you do want to shoot flash photography, there are other cheaper flashes you can get. Yongnuo do a range of cheaper flashes. Have a look at one of those. I'll link it in the description if you want to. But if you are going to shoot flash, get yourself a proper speedlight flash. Do not use that 7D Mark II pop-up flash. In fact, you know what? Keep it clipped down. Tape it down. Don't go anywhere near it. I'm sure someone's going to comment below now telling me they've got some amazing flash photos using the pop-up flash. And you know what? If you have, fair play to you, because I don't think I could do it. And I suppose, just to round us off, the last thing I will say is don't count this camera out. It is still a really relevant camera. And in fact, in the crop sensor market with Canon right now, the newest camera is the 90D, I think it is. But actually, you know what? I've seen loads of comparisons. This keeps up with that. And you can get one of these used in good condition for just a few £100s. So my last and final point and my summary would be, don't count out the 7D Mark II, because it is a great, great camera. And I think that just about rounds off today's video. If you guys have other tips about the 7D Mark II, stick it in the comments. Let everyone else know as well, because I'm sure people will find that useful. Hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.